usually see it here Sunday mornings, but because of the Olympics, a special Saturday edition of State of Texas InDepth starts right now.
Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We're less than 90 days away from the presidential election, and this week the race came to Texas. Hillary Clinton's running mate Tim Kaine campaigned Tuesday in Austin. He thanked Democratic volunteers in East Austin and made a few campaign phone calls. Later he stopped by a Mexican restaurant. Kaine switched between Spanish and English while speaking with workers and customers. He's trying to win support, even though polls show Texas will likely go to the GOP in November.
This has been a season of surprises, so we might see some polls we like now, but there's no guarantee that'll be the case next week. There's no guarantee that'll be the case after Labor Day. We have to assume this thing is tough.
It's been 40 years since a Democratic presidential candidate won Texas. That was Jimmy Carter back in 1976. It's been just a month since a gunman killed 5 police officers in Dallas. Next session, lawmakers could help families of fallen first responders. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick announced he wants to exempt those spouses from all property taxes.
Even if a home is paid for either by a foundation or help through the state or through a private individual, quite frankly, the spouse of a fallen officer or fireman or other first responder may not be able to afford the property taxes to even stay in the house.
The property tax exemption would match policies for spouses of those killed serving in the military. Patrick said he will push that legislation next session. He also urged more funding for heavy-duty ballistic vests that could stop rifle rounds. Looking ahead this week, your power bill and your child's education will be the talk at the Capitol. On Monday, the House State Affairs Committee will examine utility rates and the state agency that regulates them. Then on Tuesday, the Senate Education Committee will look at pre-K across the state. Lawmakers will also discuss ways to measure teacher performance. In Washington, the House Ethics Committee announced this week it would continue the inquiry into Representative Roger Williams. This all has to do with an amendment Williams proposed back in November. It would exempt some small car rental businesses from new regulations involving recalled cars. The thing is, Williams owns a car dealership that offers loaner cars, so the amendment, according to the federal agency, could have benefited Williams personally. Williams denied the claim, saying nothing was unethical about the amendment. In fact, he pointed out loaner cars make up just 0.03% of the dealership's annual revenue. So far this year, the House Ethics Committee announced inquiries into 7 members.
It's scary. You know, if you're in a rural area and isolated from development, you know, it's a different situation. But if you're in areas of growth or areas of growth upstream of your well, it can be pretty scary.
Deadly contaminants in your water. They're potential problems for some specific Texans. Why the state does not require them to test what they're drinking first. Next on State of Texas. When you turn on the faucet, you expect clean, safe water. But a source of drinking water for 15 million households in the U.S. remains untested and unregulated nationwide. Why? Because private wells are private property, and it's the homeowner's responsibility to test for safety. Groundwater can contain potentially deadly contaminants. Now, KXAN investigator Kevin Schwaller discovered the state is struggling to educate well owners about the need for testing.
Water's pumped up out of here.
Michael O'Shields works to protect this water. He's the director of facilities at the Marbridge Foundation in rural Travis County. The mission here, help people with special needs work toward independence. O'Shields' part is making sure these pipes give the campus clean drinking water.
If we don't have clean groundwater, we'll have to have it shipped in, bought it, would cause total havoc for us.
State rules help protect the water here. Because hundreds of people drink this water, the state licenses O'Shields and mandates testing. In 2014, a letter had O'Shields and Marbridge keeping particularly close watch of its precious resource. State regulators warned tests at a well near this gas station across the street from Marbridge had gasoline contamination. KXAN obtained hundreds of such letters in more than 50 contamination cases since 2014, where the state alerted nearby well owners. thanks to testing, O'Sheil's ensured the chemicals from across the street did not seep into the water supply here. But homeowners are largely on their own.
It's a little bit scary. If you own a private well, you really ought to do some testing.
Gas leaks and chemical spills are hardly the only threats. The state tracks naturally occurring contamination. This map shows traces of arsenic in groundwater, with the red and black dots at concentrations above safe drinking water standards. Studies link long-term arsenic exposure to cancer. The red and black dots in this next map show high concentrations of nitrates. Exposure to dangerous levels can lead to sickness or death in babies.
We ask people when we do programs, when was the last time you had your water tested? The most frequent answer is never.
They're going to check the water for any E. coli, any kind of bacteria.
The Texas Well Owner Network is helping people like Joan Lawson test their wells. This gathering at the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District offered basic analysis for private well owners.
My husband said you must have the well water checked because even though you say it tastes good, you never know what could be in there.
The instances of really serious things are fairly rare. On occasion, somebody might think they see a sheen in their water, like an oil sheen. There might be some sort of petroleum contamination.
To help well owners, the state is focusing on education through programs like this. The state is also working to combat man-made issues such as gas leaks. Over the last few years, Texas has seen a sharp drop in contamination cases, going from nearly 1,400 new cases in the late 90s to less than 300 in 2014. The head of the Texas Groundwater Protection Committee credits the change in part to lawmakers and the Environmental Protection Agency taking on the issue of leaky gas tanks.
Set up funds that would provide for the cleanup and the replacement of tanks, and enacted legislation that included monitoring systems that we didn't have before to determine when a tank was leaking.
Early warning that can help give well owners the same notice O'Sheil's got. But as he knows, testing is about more than clean water. It's about the safety of the people who drink it.
It's a really wonderful place and very beneficial. It's one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done.
That was Kevin Schwaller reporting. If you're wondering, have any wells around me been contaminated? Well, online right now we have an interactive map plotting all of the notices that have gone out to well owners for that very thing across the entire state for the last 2 years. Just search for this story on the homepage of KXAN.com. Coming up, how you can easily test your water, maybe at no cost. Plus, the investigators behind our story take us inside their digging. Next on State of Texas. Welcome back to State of Texas. Before the break, we showed you how 15 million people in the nation get their water from private wells. But because those wells are on private property, there's no regulation, and it's up to their owners to get the water tested for dangerous contaminants. As part of an in-depth report I worked on with these two guys, investigators Kevin Schwaller and David Barrere. Thanks for being with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So we were just talking about, how many people use these private wells, and they're not regulated. They're not regulated anywhere in the nation, and here in Texas it doesn't look like that's going to happen either. I know you talked to the people from the Groundwater Protection Committee. What did they tell you about that?
Right, well, there's no state regulation of private water wells, and it doesn't appear that people that have private wells really want regulation. It's their property, and so the way that it works is that they're in charge of making sure that their water is safe to drink.
Now, there are some safeguards that the state has just at the beginning there when those drillers are actually coming in and making the wells, but after that, that's pretty much where it ends. And that's kind of what we looked at in our story, is what could get into these wells. Now, I know that you talked a little bit about the gas station that was kind of the focal point of the guy from the Marbridge Foundation. There was a leak or some kind of contamination before the people that own it now, but the people that own it now, they did something to protect themselves in the future. That's right. They put in new piping, they tell us, and also some detection equipment. And that's been a big push from the state, is to make sure that, especially at these places like this where the TCEQ can regulate, that they go in and they make sure that leaks and things like that, contaminants that could get into well water, are actually getting fixed, but that they're also being monitored. Yeah, and that's important. And like you said in your story, was the fact that, it's not just being proactive that way. You have to also test. Is testing really that complicated?
I know we went to one of those testing centers and everything, but that seemed like it only happens every now and then. How easy is it for water well owners to get their water tested?
It's not that hard. We have some resources online that we put in our story that can kind of guide people in our area. The state has resources. You can check on those online, and your local groundwater conservation district can also help you out. If you can just look up where you live and call them, and they can reach out to you as well.
And those tests can actually be relatively inexpensive, $10 to $20, sometimes up to $50. But in the case we looked at this conservation district, they were offering them for free. The district was covering the cost.
And it's easy. You can go and get the kit and do it yourself and bring it back and they'll test it.
Exactly right.
Yep. But if they find worse stuff in your water than maybe bacteria or something, you can go and get further testing done.
Yeah, exactly. There are always resources out there to take it to labs to get that testing done. And that's actually what we found too, is some of the reservations sometimes with people with getting testing is, they don't want to know what's in their water, so then they're not responsible for having to pay for that fix, because sometimes it can be expensive, especially if there's a problem with how that well is holding up. It can be pretty costly to get that fixed to make sure the water's safe.
I don't want to know. I do want to protect my health, right?
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being with us. I appreciate it. Good story.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, big business polluting your Central Texas waterways over and over. KXAN investigates these repeat offenders and why the state's only giving them a slap on the wrist. Next on State of Texas.